As you might guess, even though I know much of psychological literature and research and theories almost like the back of my hand, and value and use the insight, the keen observations, the techniques that flow from these observations and things like that, you notice I always turn back to this, more with an open heart, asking God to give me whatever new insight I can get. For every time I read, seems like things get a bit clearer. My belief is that God has given us not only the blueprint of how life works, but also He has given us so much evidence of His love, so that we know without a doubt, and this is the knowing that God loves us. And that's that warmth within the heart. That's that we that God forms with us constantly, and that's what you can always count on. So I want to go back to words of Ephesians 4. Remember, I'm talking about verse 15. It said, speaking the truth in a spirit of love. This is a guiding passage for me for any type of spiritual growth, especially when a person's spirit is malformed and there's chaos within the soul or chaos within the family. I always assume that there are implicit lies within the family substructure that have been passed on sometimes for generations. Lies that may be as simple as, let's just keep a front in other people. It's more important that other people think good of us than for us to be honest about what's really going on. That's just a subtle lie that was a part of my family background. As a pastor's family, that's the way we were to live life. We were to have that pretense so that the members would think good of us. And that's a subtle lie. It goes to more profound lies. Lies which say, no, the sexual abuse didn't occur. No, what you remember is not true. Or, hey, this is our little secret, so don't tell anybody, and it's okay. See, the lie is that it's okay. It's okay what happened between the two of us, but just don't tell anybody. You see, these are all those little lies, and you can see when a child is trying to form ideas of reality, then these lies, especially if they're family lies, actually become a part of that child's thinking or a part of that child's understanding of reality, and they start forming their whole spirit, how the consciousness is organized, how their soul is organized, profoundly is affected by these lies. I like this passage then in Ephesians 5. That's why the truth spoken in love is the most powerful weapon I have to bring to confession. It's a truth spoken in love, and so many of my skills that I've developed over the years is to be able to spot where I sense something is going on that doesn't quite fit reality or fit what I would consider God. I catch that little slight moment when I see a little kid's face, a slight reaction where I say, uh-oh, where'd that one come from? These are all gifts to be able to spot and know where to home in so that I can expose the lie. And so much of what I'm doing, I think, is just bringing people to confession in ways that they don't even know how. Just really getting them to face. And by the way, I don't really buy into Freud's notion of the unconscious. I really think the spirit knows everything. And I think your spirit really knows what's the truth. But what's happened is, in order to survive, you've pushed certain things away and unfocused them. I like the more Gestalt notion of unfocused, that you just haven't focused on it because every time something comes up and you could focus on it, it's too anxiety producing, and even before you know it, you've pushed away from it. So there are all sorts of things then, and sometimes you can't get to them, and protectively so, because if you would get to something that you had to push aside because it was far too dangerous and scary for you to deal with back then, well, if you walk bold into it, you'll get clobbered. I mean, your mood and emotions would be so ripped apart that you would be suicidal and depressed and everything else because you can't handle all that. And so your spirit wonderfully protects you. And that's why I don't like the idea of unconscious as if there's this big dynamic monolith down there swirling, stewing. No, I think it's your spirit that has shielded and guarded you from certain things. Yet the trouble is, what you have been shielded and guarded from often contain a lie. And it stays in the darkness. And remember, God can heal the truth, but he can't heal a lie. And guess who works in the darkness? Satan. So listen to this. Chapter 5. For you were once in darkness, but now are light in the Lord. So live as children of light. Like, duh. You don't have to live in that darkness anymore. You don't have to, because God protects you completely, wholly, through and through. Live as children of light. For the fruit of the light consists of goodness, righteousness, and truth. Notice that? The fruit of the light is always goodness. Finally, you're becoming a we, going outward. Righteousness, now you're living according to the way God, that you love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, others as yourself. You're living the right way, the way God intended. And truth. You don't have to hide anything anymore. You don't always have to be scared you're going to be found out, which is most people that I counsel. They're afraid that someone's really going to find them out because they're hiding things. Because if people really knew, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Hear that? But rather expose them. But now make sure in love. I mean, the American press wonderfully exposed all sorts of things about President Clinton. But I didn't see a whole lot of love. I didn't hear a whole lot of love in that whole expose. Did you? I mean, there's one thing to expose, and the other thing is to expose for the purpose of helping, for the purpose of something better, for the good of the we. And then it says, for it is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. Ooh, is that a mouthful? I can just flash hundreds of cases of the little sexual stuff, all the other stuff, the deceit, all the subtle things that lie in the background of virtually everybody. And so, obviously, we're not going to talk about them here. And so, I'm almost thinking that one of the ways the devil gets us and keeps us bound is with shame. And as I look at the new culture coming up, who have been wonderfully experienced sexually, if you can use that term, I look in their faces and I see shame. I see the loss of purity. That's scary. Because once you feel that ashamed, then the devil's got you. And then, shoot, you can do anything because you can't bring any more shame on yourself. And so, shoot, why not? Then you see then the patterns continue. And that loss of purity is profound. Imagine for a female, we'll talk about this Sunday night, for a female who's lost that purity. What's life like then? What's your body like? What do you feel about your body then? Oh. So how do you become pure again? Hear that word, pure? Scripture is very clear on this. God makes you pure again. He makes you pure in such a way that your bodies. And I love the passage. This is an aside, but this one really hit me across the face not too long ago. When begin to see the gift males give to females in marriage. No matter what shame is there at all, no matter what image of their bodies, or that sense that maybe certain things about them are to be hidden or covered. See Ephesians 5? Husbands, love your wife. Now, interesting, exactly what Christ did to the church. Is the church without blemish? But look what Christ did. Christ looks at you and sees you in such a way that you feel pure. And so the image, what husbands do, husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Then, to make her holy, cleansing her by washing with water, to present her to himself as a radiant church without any stain or wrinkle or other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands love their wives. Can you see it's that in the context of the we and the loving relationship, the way the husband looks and adores the wife? Can you see what that does to the purity, to bring the purity back? No matter what's happened, what a gift. So husbands, do it. Of course, the wives have an equal gift to give. No matter how much beaten down the male ego is, no matter how much the male feels that he's inadequate and is beating himself to death trying to prove his adequacy and prove to his father that he's worth something and everything else. Look what in one little way, look what the wives can do. Wives, he doesn't have to say too much. Wives, respect your husbands. Well, he does say submit. And in a wonderful way, the submission of the wife, which is, I said, willingly show respect for, it's that look in the wife's eyes that said, you are everything to me. That the husband goes, I just saw that look there. Wow, look at Graham. It's that almost look where the husband can feel all the adequacy and everything else in that one swoop. And then the husband is healed. All of the damaged ego and all the maleness that the husband questioned right there in that one look. You see the gift? This is why I say the we, flowing from God in a loving context, can heal. Let's go back to darkness. That was interesting, by the way. But everything exposed to the light, after we're talking about shame, done in secret, everything exposed to the light becomes visible. For the light makes everything visible. That's why he quotes, wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine upon you. Then he goes into, hey, speak to one another, psalms, hymn, and spiritual songs. Got music here as a way, spiritual songs that make music in your heart to the Lord. And then always giving thanks to God and everything in the name of Christ. Then he says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So if you sing and after there's joy in your heart, well, then you submit to one another. Then the we becomes more important than the me, see? That's the power. That's the power that leads you to do that. I'm going to start with a clip of video talking about truth. And then we're going to get into type 3 disorders. These are those where the spirit is malformed, where there's a lie embedded. So let's take a look at the video. This will be renewing, and this will be living with purpose. This is where the book and with all the spiritual discipline exercises. And the video designed to go along with this. Again, the video sort of taken out of missing ingredient.
Honesty with myself is really important for me to move on in my life.
I lived in denial for a long time. I lied to myself. I lied to everybody.
But I realized on my own when I saw my life crumbling down around me, I go, this is not love. This is not anything but sin, because everybody is hurt.
I think that sometimes when you go through all these different anger periods, you have a tendency to blame somebody else, that they are the sinner and you're the righteous one.
When I became honest and said, this is what's going on, and this is how I feel, then things were working out much better, because, I mean, you know, honesty may hurt to be honest at first, but it doesn't hurt as much as lies do.
Well, Leonard, you got your test results back here. Let's see how that new heart's doing. Tell me, have you had any trouble with the exercise program? Or the diet restrictions?
Not really, no.
You've been walking every day?
Well, you know, trying to.
Staying away from those favorite deadly foods of yours?
That's not a problem.
Hi, honey.
Hi. Steamed veggies.
And salad.
I can hardly wait.
Leonard.
It's much easier to cover over or to pretend or to cover things up. That is such an easy way. But each time that happens, robs your life of a greater depth.
Oh, here's your cholesterol results.
Yeah, how do they look?
How do you think they look?
Pretty good, I hope.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but they don't look pretty good. As a matter of fact, they look pretty lousy. But I think you know that.
What do you mean?
Look, Leonard, you don't have to be honest with me. But if you're lying, you're only hurting yourself.
Well, you certainly don't pull any punches, do you?
I just want to help you. But if you don't make me your ally in all of this, I can't help you at all. A doctor and a patient have to work as a team.
Look, I don't need any help sticking to some diet, you know. I'm fine.
Oh, you're fine, huh?
Yeah.
Tell me, did you or did you not go through the drive-thru at least once this past week?
Maybe.
You're probably not walking at all. These same behavior patterns are exactly what resulted in your old heart arresting twice. Now, if you continue to engage in these patterns, what do you think's going to happen to your new heart?
Confession means getting down to what you know to be true deep inside. If you lie, it's like pushing the Holy Spirit away from your heart.
Okay. You made your point.
What freedom there is in saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner.
Okay, so I'm weak. You know, I can't do this alone.
And every time through the work of the Holy Spirit, you can make that choice to say something very difficult, and yet it's very honest, and your heart is strengthened.
And that's to improve your quality of life. Now, to achieve that goal, we have to be open and honest. We have to communicate.
Mm-hmm. And, exactly how is that supposed to keep me from eating fried foods?
Well, for starters, I can change your medication. I can put you in touch with a support group that will help you change your behaviors, and I can give you this.
What is it?
That is my 24-hour toll-free beeper number. I want you to call me whenever you're feeling weak, and I don't care if you're standing underneath those golden arches at 2 a.m. I want you to call me because I can help.
Well, thank you, Doctor. I mean that, really. I do. But, you know, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to be calling you at 2 a.m.
Really, it's okay.
No, I'm going to be calling you about 5:30 p.m. See, that's when I drive by those golden arches on my way home from work.
Through this examining of myself and making myself vulnerable, even though I'm vulnerable anyway, it's recognizing this, that I always have been. And taking a deep breath and saying, well, okay, I've done this, this, and this, and he loves me, and it's okay. I mean, it's not maybe okay of what I've done, but it's okay because he loves me anyway.
Tap the Word, tap the resources of God, and you'll find out there's much, much more. But we look for it in the world. We look for it in all the wrong places.
A lot of people look to themselves for answers, and if you're already a confused person, where are you supposed to find the answers in yourself? The only real answer is from God who created you, and He has the answers.
All the promises in this Word are just, I mean, I haven't even scratched it. We don't even scratch the surface. But the promises of the Word, He comes down from above with the power of the Holy Spirit. He will reveal to us what we need to know about ourselves.
That it's wonderful to have friends and to have them encourage you because of their faith, but you can't borrow on their faith. And that God wants to have that relationship, with you. It's your relationship with Him, and it's very unique.
We live in such a fast-paced world that we have to discipline our will to give the time to find out that there's more.
You gotta trust in Him. Things don't happen like, in an instant. It takes time. He wants you to see where where you fall short, say, yeah, you know. And you got to believe in the scripture that, you know, even though it was written so many years ago, it's life. It's human life, you know. You know, you might have different music, different houses, cars, planes, and trucks and what have you, but it just tells you of a good way of life and a promise that you're going to have eternal life at the end.
And his spirit will speak to you, and sometimes there's so many things in our lives that crowd him out, other voices, other desires, other things. And so when you have an opportunity to focus in on him alone and make that choice to block those things out, he does speak to you, and it's really exciting.
The truth will set you free. Motto of Lenore Rhine University, where I teach. Only some of the previous words prior to that are forgotten so often. And the truth is so often the research truth that we find, giving the university professors the right to stand up for things that they know in their discipline, even though they may not be politically correct. That is seen as the truth. Actually, the truth carries two connotations. One, of course, is honesty, what you know to be true. But the words prior to this is, if you continue in my word, you shall be my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You see, the truth that really sets you free is knowing the truth. And so often, you need God's guidance and help in order to probe some of the lies, because some of the lies are very convincing. And so often it is God speaking in his authority and his word, coming at those times when, let's say, a strategy has been formed, and now you're trying to get back and reform that strategy and counseling. So often it is a word from God that does expose in a good way and convince the person in their hearts that this was a lie and that God is real and what he says and his word is the truth. So if you continue in my word, then you're disciples, then you will know the truth, and then the truth will set you free. That's the truth. But in many other ways, just telling the truth is a great freeing aspect if you are living deceit in any part of your lives. Just telling the truth, confessing. For you see, again, God can heal the truth, but he can never heal a lie. I put up on the board, getting to concrete counseling situations, I put up on the board again, I think, the basic lies that govern the head, body, and the spirit. I think the lies that the head buys into is that you can find security by being perfect. In other words, you are capable of forming your own security in your life by being perfect. I think that's the basic lie. And I see this all the time in many subtle and various forms that, yes, a little child feeling that if they're really, really good, then they can buy security and keep the uncertainties and all the other stuff that's going on from making them upset. And so some people have so bought into that they're so scared not to be perfect. Because then, or if they're so scared not to take care of a situation, for that no one will. I have so much trouble with big heads who, in a relationship where it's so tilted this way that this person's controlling everything and this person's just checked out, and they say, well, if I don't do it, they won't do it. They're so scared. They're so scared not to do it for fear it won't get done, because if it doesn't get done, then chaos will occur, you know. There's a little girl, a little boy inside there that's all scared and frightened that if they don't do it or if the thing doesn't get done, then all chaos will ensue. And so how do you get to that little message and let the person know that security doesn't come from keeping things perfect? Because they really believe it. They really believe their security is at stake in some profound way, in some irrational way, of course, some profound way that this is true. Then the other one is to get people who feel that their needs won't be met unless they rebel. Somehow the lie is they have to get their own needs met. Somehow they have to fend for themselves, and if they listened to their mother or father, then they wouldn't have any fun, or they're always rebelling and reacting. And so it's like a strategy that the rebellious side, or that gives license to the body. Then I deal with someone. I remember someone who's overeating, and I tried to give her some spiritual discipline. And it was really interesting as she traced it. She said she did this. She prayed. She hugged her stomach and said, "No, we're not going to eat." And the next thing she knew, there was anger inside like you wouldn't believe. I mean, just raging anger inside. She said she couldn't control that anger until she went and ate something. Whoa, she didn't even know it was there, but this raging anger was that strategy. The body felt that in order to fix her mood, this is what it had to do, and so it got really angry because it was going against what it felt was it felt was supposed to happen. So it wasn't fair that she didn't let the body eat anything it wanted to, and she was, a fairly large woman. So we start getting to the lie. When you get a little bit closer, suddenly you do something like that, and you realize that, wow, is that protected? You get this rage inside that she wasn't going to let him eat, and so it was way too powerful for her to control. Just, wow, and she didn't even know that rage was there. And then we traced that rage back, and you know what we found? That moment, that one moment at 6 years old, when she was a difficult learner. She couldn't learn visually very well. And her father was a perfectionist, and she was absolutely terrified of her father. And she'd gone to her room and studied and studied and studied and came back and was reciting things to Mother and was making some mistakes. And with that, Dad blew up, and he said, "You went up there and you didn't study. You go back up there right now and you study." And the little girl remembers going up to her room and trashing her room. She was so angry. Just throwing things down and everything like that. And she came back down under control after she straightened her room back up and tried harder so that Dad wouldn't get angry. That's where the rage came from. That's why she was overeating. That's why there's so much rage, and the rage was directed at that perfectionistic message her father was giving her, that she was constantly, and her head had bought into that message, and so the rage was, this is the only way I'm going to be able to satisfy myself, so you're not taking this from me, see? I felt the battle there, and see, now we're down at that 6-year-old level. We're down to a 6-year-old who didn't feel loved. We're down to a 6-year-old strategy. Because from that point on, she found comfort in food. What happened, whenever Father would yell at her, she remembered, next thing would happen, she would be stuffing herself. And then she felt comfort. Like she could dull her senses, and then she wouldn't feel. And that was her protection. That was her security. And now, what was she's 45. Look at all of her life governed by this powerful, powerful, powerful set of emotions, all going back to a 6-year-old and a formation of a strategy, which was the only thing she could do back to then, but her whole life now is governed by this strategy. That's why I say the strategies of the body have to do with satisfaction, protected by anger, rebellion, things like that. This dean I was talking about, it's really interesting to listen to him talk. He's a painter, and so he'll tell you everything. Stephanie's brother. And he gets really angry because he feels he deserves. His mother died. I finally got to the logic, and so I got real close. His mother died. And so he lost his mother, so he deserves everything he can get from his father. See his logic? And he really believes it. He really, really, really believes this. He really believes that he was shortchanged, and now he deserves everything. And so that's his side of playing the game. He really does. He really believes that he deserves everything, and he deserves to go out on these binges because here he lost his mother. That's his strategy, you see. A strategy that he's living by, and as long as his father buys into it, no boundaries are set, that's the one that's going to govern his life. So the strategies of the body. Just as an aside, I was going to go into panic attacks before. Just as an aside, since I'm getting into that, I was talking about the be perfect and security. Panic attacks are very mysterious. The same way agoraphobia or things like this, or just phobias themselves. Freud was sort of right in indicating that the phobia usually symbolizes something, but not right in terms it always symbolizes sexual stuff or things like that. And what I do, phobias are very mysterious because they pop up and it's almost like they're a signal over here, but the real stuff's over here. In other words, it seems like as I trace phobias, or as I trace any type of phobic reaction, or trace panic attacks, which are, sort of the key, sometimes the key element of phobia, it's almost like there's a little kid in there who doesn't have any other way to get expressed except through the phobia. In other words, the little kid in there is so over-controlled by usually a fairly obsessive-compulsive person who's anxiety-ridden, that the little kid, it seems like they've been shoved in a box, and the only button they've got is whatever the panic is. The only way they have to get the person's attention is to press the panic button. And I traced it with this one gal who now teaches for us. She's really come a long way. She's now gotten her doctorate in psychology and the like, and I think she's really well grounded. Of course, she remembered as she was 11, 12, 13. She remembered at night she would get up and go to the bathroom or something like that, and when she'd come back, her father would be standing there. And then she knew what would happen, and she sort of had blocked all of this out, and so they would go back in the bathroom, and she would service her father, and then she would come out. And all of this stuff got blocked out, of course. And now, what was the panic coming? Well, she had to repress all of her sexuality. She had to repress everything. She had to shove all that away, because there's no way she could deal with that then. She knew if she told her mother, the parents would split up, and her father told her that, hey, you can never tell mother we'll split apart, and it'll be your fault. And she believed that. These are the lies. These are usually the lies that go on in cases like that. And so here, she's on her second marriage. Marriage not doing very well. And suddenly, she's driving. She has a horrible panic attack, just total fear of driving. And she's immobilized. She stops. And she grabs a cell phone that she had and calls her husband. So her husband comes and picks her up. And she's just, she says, she's usually controlling everything. She's able to control everything, but now all of a sudden she can't control something. And that's that little kid desperately wanting someone to take care of her, take control of her life. And that's the only thing that it can do to get at least some attention from husband, because she was totally helpless. It's like a medical condition, so her husband would respond to her. So this is what I did. Realizing that was the only voice I had of that little kid inside, I told her to see the panic as her friend. Normally she'd start feeling the panic and she would just react from it, totally paralyzed by it, pushing it away, and she'd spend hours fighting it, trying to fight off the panic. I said, fight the panic in. That's your friend. And then in the panic, see if you can find that little girl's face. And it was through that we got to this 11-year-old scene where father sexually did something with her. It was through the panic. When we started listening, we let the panic come in, and boy, this was scary. She could only do it in my presence. She couldn't do it by herself. But as she did it in my presence, and it took a number of sessions, because she would try to open up the panic, and it would just, she'd go red, and she couldn't take it. But gradually she got used to that, learned not to be scared of it, and the breakthrough came when she literally believed that was her little girl trying to talk to her. That was her spirit now. And when she really believed the panic wasn't this big monster that was trying to clobber her, she really believed there was a little girl trying to talk to her. She finally listened, and then the panic subsided, and she could hear the little girl. And then the scene popped in her mind. And of course, a scene of her father, which then we could work through. So that's just as an aside. It's one of the ways I see the panic or the phobia as possibly giving you an entree or insight into the voice of the whatever that age person is that develop this over-control strategy. At what point did the we break apart? Going into the person's spirit, how is that person's spirit formed? Well, let me go back one step, which will be very intriguing and interesting to you, before I get into the deceit itself. I'm convinced that the child's spirit's initial formation is out of the we of the family. So much so that I really believe that if the two parents got along and formed a good we and formed a good relationship, then the child's spirit develops out of the atmosphere of love more a we And as a result, the spirit is more in charge, and the person doesn't hear the voices inside. In other words, the level of internal conversation is very low. So that when something has to be done, this is what literally happens. The spirit checks with the impulse. Well, do you want to do it? The spirit checks with the mind. Well, should we do it? And then if there's conflict where I'm tired, but the mind said, well, look, this is important, then the spirit goes, hey, okay, I know you're tired, but this is very, very important, so we will do it. And it's like that level of conversation where both give their input and then neither of them rebel because this is what we're going to do. Because the body knows next time the spirit is going to take it in consideration much more also. And so the next time the person will say, no, we are tired. It's much better for us at this point that we sleep or that we don't do this. See? So there are good boundaries. There's a good we. And that we comes in the context of a good marital relationship because in some profound way, each of these elements, the control and the impulse, seem to match either parent. And so in my own case, my head, that's usually the dominant parent. My head is more mom. My body is more dad. And since they had a fairly good relationship, then I don't have a whole lot of internal talk going on initially. Now, of course, when I mess myself up, get into bad situations, suddenly my spirit breaks down, and now I hear a lot of internal talk, you see? That's more my doing. I'm just talking way at the beginning, that the spirit, which is the relationship between the head and the body, gets its initial strength from the relationship between the parents. Now, this is scary because if now the parents are split and that we breaks down, and they were two me's, now, like mom and dad fought in reality, you hear the same battle going on inside your head. And if you trace it and you listen, a lot of the things that you say to yourself is exactly what dad said to mom or mom said to dad. And the reaction you have is the same rebellious or same depressive or whatever reaction the other parent had. How's that for a possibility? It's all your parents' fault. I knew it. I say that just for insight, not to blame your parents. Just say that for insight and also to tell you, my gosh, the best gift you can ever give to your children is the marriage, that you love one another. Good grief. So that's pretty much what God says. The best gift by far is that you be a we. Because in the children growing up in that atmosphere, they don't have a whole lot of internal struggle. And so you can see in terms of self-control, the kids born in a situation and developing in a situation with a lot of conflict and strife and struggle, they're endlessly fighting themselves, knowing what they should do, beating themselves up, and then rebelling, see? Going through those cycles of beating themselves up and rebelling. Whereas those children who had good boundaries and were loved and the parents formed a we, you can see they don't have a whole lot of struggle internally. Oh, they don't want to do it, they don't want to study, but they don't have these humongous battles of fighting themselves in order to get something accomplished. They're much more peaceful inside. Now, take this model a step further. There are all sorts of things that you do in your life which split this we apart internally. Let me go back to Tony now. Tony grew up in a situation where his mother and father did get along fairly well. His mother was definitely dominant. And his father, it had formed more a parent-child relationship. His father was more yes dear, and he'd get a little pathetic, and mom would mother him and so forth. So mom and dad's relationship had tilted more into a mother-son relationship to a large degree. And then Tony, to a large extent, was healthy inside, but he was the apple of mother's eye, and without a whole lot of support from dad, because dad was more weak in the relationship. What happened is as he went through adolescence, even though internally he was put together pretty well, when he went through adolescence, he never broke away. Because somehow he didn't have what it took, and it usually takes, the best situation is the two parents have a strong we, so that the dominant parent, who the child usually has to break away from, the child's more breaking away from the we than one parent, because they have strength from both parents to break away. Or if both parents are active and there's a dominant parent, the child can still rebel against the dominant parent because they feel the strength and support of the other parent. Those are good situations. The bad situations like this is when the other parent basically was not part of the equation, even though there was a good relationship. And when Tony tried to break away, here he is, here's Tony's spirit. When he tried to break away, he got enmeshed. He couldn't, he still had to be perfect. And so his rebellion went underground. Oh, he did some sexual stuff and things like that, but he would never tell his mother, of course. He went underground. And so on the surface, he was this wonderful things. But in order to keep up the image, he bought into a lie, and that is he could do things and get by with them. He could do things and keep them covered. In fact, as I talked to Tony, he said the governing principle of his life is that he could fix anything. All he had to do was work harder. Because he found out in his life, if anything was wrong, all he had to do was make up to his mom, just work a little bit harder, and she'd be pleased with him again. And so this little strategy he developed at age, probably 8 or 9, and then really set into place at age 13, 14 when he rebelled and couldn't. He was living his life, as I said before, with the strategy that if he could work a little bit harder, he could fix it. Okay, now, when the resentment built up, because this is a piling on strategy, and it's exactly what he called it. He married, he tried to be the perfect husband for his wife, and of course he married in a situation where his wife had much, much more money than he did, so he always felt that he had to work much, much harder to prove themselves worthy of this family, and blah, blah, all the dynamics that were going on in terms of his masculinity and the like. And so he was building on resentment. It's like every time his wife got upset at him, he felt that heavy feeling. He had to work harder. He had to work harder to fix it. Well, I said, once it pops up here, you're dead. The devil's got you. There's no way you can free yourself at that point. And so when it popped up here in Tony, and he finally was vulnerable and formed this relationship with this other woman, they had the affair. This is exactly what happened to Tony. His head and body split, and he became two people. That's one of the most helpful images that I've come across in dealing with situations like this. Because his body now was bonded to other woman, head was still bonded to Gwen, and now he was literally two different people. And his spirit now was broken. By having an affair, he permanently damaged his spirit. In other words, his spirit was broken. He was no longer in charge inside. And so what would literally happen as I traced those 6 months, he would be with Gwen, his wife, where he should be. This is the should. And all he could think about was this other woman. She would come into his thoughts. He would remember the closeness. And so he would get angry at Gwen. He would, at this point, as you trace back those 6 months, he would pick arguments. He would be sullen. He would be moody, like this. And then he would go over here, and it's so wonderful and fulfilling. But he was over here for a little while, and suddenly he started feeling guilty. All of a sudden, he was enjoying this, but he wasn't really enjoying it because he was thinking about his children and his family. Oh my gosh, what am I doing to them? And so his guilt would get stronger and stronger. So he'd go back here. Okay, now his guilt was okay. He's with his family. But now, you see, he was two different people, both vying for control, and whichever one took control would be the dominant force. I say this because this really helps if you are either a person like that or you're living with a person like that. They are two people. So that when they come home and they're remorseful, and they say, look, they're genuine. That part of them is genuine. And this part is absolutely distressed over what's going on. This person's in hell right now, by the way. If you think an affair is having fun, no, you split into two people and you're in hell. Because now this person, they mean it until this side kicks in, and then they're a totally different person. Now they're totally detached, they could care less, they feel totally invulnerable. And sometimes the shift takes place within hours, sometimes within minutes. All of a sudden, the old person's back, and now the new person comes, picks a fight. This also occurs in alcoholism and any other. This is a sexual addiction. It occurs in any of the other addictions because you actually split yourself into two people. And so the alcoholic will be good. Please, please, I'll be better this time. I won't do it. And they're genuine. That's why it's so easy to believe them, because they are genuine. I mean, they literally believe at that point, and with all their might and strength, they are going to do better, and then something happens, and all of a sudden, hell with it. Now, they could care less. Now they're out drinking. And they come back remorseful again, see? And it's so easy to be codependent in situations like this because you love that remorseful side because, it's so attentive and so things like that. Just love that side. But then you have to live with the other side because the other side takes over, because it's building up resentment. Okay, I like this. It really is helpful to me. The whole notion that this person has a deep spiritual problem. What's happened is the spirit is literally broken. And now they are now two different people, both vying for control. And you don't know at any given time which one's going to take control, so that person can't be trusted. In a more minor sense, you can sort of hear this in people. You can hear both sides talking at the same time, and you don't know what to trust. Let's say if I were to talk, both my head and my body giving you contradictory messages now, what would it sound like? Like I could say, we got a half hour to go. Boy, I'm really excited that we've got another half hour. You've just been double messaged. My head said what I should say. In other words, I should say to keep up the pretense that I'm all excited. But my body looks at that and says, Now, that wasn't true. I just... You see, you get double messaged all the time. You hear the two voices talking. One's the verbal, one's the nonverbal. But normally the person has some center. And you can hear it. If a person says, well, yeah, I really should help out, Carl. I should help out and help arrange the next thing, but I'm awfully busy. And the next Tuesday, that's really tough. But I tell you what, I'll probably make it. You can sort of count on me. Can't you hear the double message? They're saying they don't want to hurt Carl's feelings. They want to be a good person, but they don't want to do it. And so, will they show up or not? Well, it depends on who's in control. At that given moment, if the head's in control and they feel sufficiently guilty, they'll show up. That moment, if the body's in control, they'll forget all about it. And they'll come back, oh, Carl, I forgot all about it. Why? Because they hadn't committed themselves, you see? Only their head committed. The body wasn't committed. You can actually hear it in a person's voice. And this is now, when we get into this stage of when a person's spirit gets stronger, we're talking about the new self taking more control and strengthens the spirit, a new and right spirit, then you hear the person say will a lot more. Because the word will, this is I should, this is, well, I want to, this is I will. That means someone else is in charge inside. I like that term. There's a healthy force in charge inside, which is the new self and the right spirit. And that new self looks and says, Carl, that's a good thing you're giving. I hope a lot of people show up. I'm busy. Wouldn't be good for us if I came. I'd resent it, so I will not. Isn't that clean? Because that person's checking the best for all concerned and saying, no, I will not. Or they say, oh, I'm tired and I really have a passion for this, so I will. Okay? Now they will. Because now all of you have agreed. The will is the whole spirit. So any time a person can say, yes, I will. And so, okay, you heard that in St. Paul. Did I say yes, yes, and no, no at the same time? Remember? Was I double-tongued? And so that's what we can easily do. In order to be pretense, and yet you don't really feel it, you're giving out double messages. And you can see spiritual growth is when you talk to a person and you see that depth in them. And when they say something, you trust it. Because it comes from their heart, and you know they mean it. Not they're saying it, and yet you're not real sure if they really mean it or not, see? And so the will. That's why I think of the will. The person's true will is not the mind exercising control of the body. Sometimes you call that willpower. Nah, he just causes rebellion, and depends who's in control. True willpower is a gift of God from a right spirit. That's true willpower. And that's where boundaries, that's why I like to call them we boundaries. I read a lot of boundary stuff, and it all seems to be me boundaries, and it's good. Set your boundaries, but it all seems to come from what's good for me. Set the boundaries, learn to say no. I mean, for some of you, really good. It's really good if you set boundaries and learn to say no. But then what happens is you learn to say no, but then people make you feel guilty because, you really should be doing that, and that you feel selfish and self-centered. See? Okay, let me tell you what we boundaries are like. We boundaries is after your spirit has considered the good of the whole, now you set those boundaries which are good for everybody, which are good for us. And so a family unit sets those we boundaries. They say, hey, it's not good for you, Carl, to spend all this time, and so we will decide that, or it's not good for you to do this, so we will set these boundaries. It's not good for the kids to be gone so much. It's good that we do not have family meals together, so we will have family meals together. That's a priority, and those are the boundaries, see? You set we boundaries thinking not what's good for the kid, not what's good for the individual's own private advantage. We are God-breathed. We're not naturally selected. So you don't have to worry about your kids having every single advantage so that they might be able to survive better. We're God-breathed. And kids are much, much happier if the boundaries are set in that fashion and the family unit is strong and loving. And so that becomes a priority, and those are we boundaries now. So I like the idea of we boundaries that are set in any context. And so I guarantee, if you consider the whole, like I just said, Carl, it's good. I know I'm tired. If I go there, I really won't feel like coming there. Therefore, no, I will not come. Now, I have just set a we boundary. I've thought the good of the whole, myself included, and on balancing it, came out with a we boundary, because I'm thinking about the best for the we. See? Now, if I continue doing every single thing I'm doing, I'm going to get tired. It's not going to be good for all of us. And so, no, I will not do this because it's not good for all of us that this happens. See? And you don't feel guilty. Once you set the we boundary, you don't feel guilty. If you set me boundaries, this is probably the flaw in all of that literature. Oh, sure, you can say, well, I've got the right to set me boundaries, but your head will get you. Because somewhere the way you said it was self-centered. And so it's a me boundary. Back to, now, cases of deceit, pretense. Let me go back to Tony, and then go back to abuse and things like that. One of the most profound things that happened to me in my therapy practice happened with Tony. He initially, as I said, when I first presented this case, whenever he was found out, about 6 months into the affair, and of course his wife found out it was her best friend, and, all hell broke loose. Tony was still in na-na land. Because he had kidded himself, thought that he really loved this other woman, that everything would work out because he could fix it, see? That's justified resentment. The devil puts you in a sense of invulnerability. That, hey, everything's going to work out, we'll still be friends, the kids will still love me, and they'll understand that I wasn't really happy here, and I'll be happy over there. And so, and Gwen, she really doesn't love me anyway, it's pretty obvious. She'd be much happier if she married to someone else. See, all of these thoughts the devil puts in your mind, they're wonderful thoughts. And so you're in na-na land, and so he feels invulnerable, everything else. Then it hits the fan. He stays in na-na land for about 18 hours, thinking, na-na-na. And then when the reality hits that he's lost his wife and his kids, and he's moving out, and like that, all of a sudden, his head comes back and kills him. I mean, he sees the extent of what he's done. He sees, and it's all about me now. It's all about him now, still. And his head's beating him up like you wouldn't. He comes literally crawling back to Gwen and saying, look, I'll do anything. Look at the words, I'll do anything. I'll do anything. I'll do anything. The rest of my life, I'll do anything. Just please don't leave me. Please don't. That's his head. That's his head. After he had done all of this stuff, the devil had teased, tricked him into that. That's his head. And now, should she take him back? No. That's just his head talking. The relationship has profound and fundamental problems in it. If she takes him back, he'll be a good boy, good boy, good boy, good boy until the resentment builds up again, then it'll be worse. He may not have an affair again because he's, that hurt him way too much. I mean, the reality of that just jarred the foundations of his life. So he may not do that, but he certainly would detach from the marriage in some other fashion and become a workaholic or, whatever. I said one of the most profound things happened in this situation, and that happened because of the grace of God. Tony, in grave danger now of having to fix the rest of his life, of living the rest of his life with these haggard lines, just trying his best to be the best husband he could possibly be, and make sure that Gwen, who would never trust him again, could gradually gain his trust back, to work hard, and trying to fix what he had done. Grave danger of the devil getting him and taking all the joy out of his life and making it so that the marriage probably couldn't even survive with the mood that he would bring there every day as he struggles and tries and everything else. So I told Tony, you can't fix this one. Don't even try. I mean, you screwed up so bad, you can't fix it. You'd better get close to God. You'd better get close to God. They went on a religious retreat together. This by chance, they'd scheduled it already. And in God's hands at work in there somewhere. But in that religious retreat, he and his wife had the most deep, soul-searching, profound conversations they ever had. As Tony, at one point, Tony was from the depth of his heart. He looked at Gwen and said, Gwen, I can't fix this. I can't fix this. God's the only one that can help us now. And Tony said he felt a relief that he had never felt in his life. It was like the whole building crumbled that he had carefully built on trying to please everybody and everything else. And for the first time in his life, he literally felt free. Oh, he felt free with this other girl. That was the attraction. He felt totally free with her, except, guilt was always there. He really didn't feel free. That was the devil's lie. He felt that good feeling of freedom. But this was real. This was real. He said for the first time in his life, he heard God tell him. He didn't even hear the words. I think he saw Christ's face. And I think he saw Christ's face crying over all that happened. And then he saw hope. Because he saw he had done something that couldn't be fixed. And he couldn't. He came back and I saw a totally different Tony. Oh, there are plenty of stuff, plenty of demons still circulating in this situation. Don't think it's over by any means. But I think it's going to make it. I think it's going to make it in a totally different relationship because I saw Tony different. He no longer had that his childhood strategy of fixing things. Now he can grow up. Now he can become, and for the first time, this was a profound change. For the first time, it wasn't all about Tony. Please take me back so I can prove to you. See, it's all about me. For the first time, I saw him look at Gwen and say, my God, you've been hurt. I could see tears in his eyes as he looked at her. My God, you've been hurt. Wow, it's no longer all about him anymore. The gift God gave him was now he could finally be a husband and form a we out of his concern for his wife. Let me go to other cases. I've already said for some of these, like the gal who is now teaching in our department, whose father had abused her at age 11, 12, and then she, in her phobia and panic, we found the key to guide us back to the memory and to the lie. And the lie in that case was, again, the one that supported her perfectionism, that she's the one that had to keep the family together. That if she didn't do this, the family would fall apart. That's what she literally believed. Well, she broke that lie because it wasn't up to her as a child to keep the family together. She finally realized that, and she broke that lie. And in fact, she was able then to talk to her father and talk to her mother about what happened. And yes, it did cause severe problems. But hey, the truth always gives some potential hope that what was wrong with that relationship could be handled, but it wasn't her problem. She did it out of love. And no, I don't take people and force them to go back and talk. She felt strong enough and knew that it would be much healthier for their family because there's so many secrets in the family that she was propagating, that if she was going to break this pattern of secrecy, she had to go back and do it back there. And guess what her mother knew? Her mother knew. And in tears, her mother thanked her for telling her because she was so afraid of mentioning it for fear she would stir up memories in the daughter. Her mother knew and could never talk about it either. And her mother now and she have an incredible relationship, and before they were distant. I honestly don't know what happened between mother and father because that happened later. I honestly don't know what relationship she has with her father right now. I can only pray and hope. But to see her and to see the smile in her eyes and the freedom when the lie was grabbed and broken. Let me get an even much more troubling case. This was the daughter of a pastor. I think a Catholic. No, a Baptist pastor. Well, who wouldn't be Catholics? Or one that they wouldn't claim. This was a Baptist preacher's family. Tremendous pretense, but incredible chaos within the home environment. The grandfather was the pastor. The father, because of the chaos, was highly immature, stuck in sort of a rebellious underground rebellion stage. He gets married, has this person that I'm working with now. And, things look nice, things look okay. Older sister bought into the pretense, even though she's about 300 pounds, which gives you a little hint that maybe something else is going on. But older sister claims that they had a wonderful, perfect childhood, nothing was ever wrong, and blah, 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 blah. Even though mother left father when this girl was about age 6 or 7, but the older sister says, well, that's because they just weren't getting along real well, and so mother left. Well, and the older sister won't touch it. And in fact, constantly is critical of the younger sister for exposing some of the things that younger sister exposed. Well, the younger sister I first saw, because of marital difficulties. And this was probably the best manipulator I have ever come across. And she didn't even know it. She endlessly manipulated her husband, trying to find out if he really did love her. And her kids endlessly manipulated them, trying to get them to respond to her, but thought she was doing it out of love. I mean, she really wasn't a mean person. She was a Christian, and she thought she was doing this out of... She really did. Well, her husband had grown tired of her, had tried to respond and fix her, and he has his own problems, and so that relationship, never did do much. And he only came once or twice, and then he saw no point in it and didn't come again. So, if the other person isn't coming, I can't work on the marriage anymore. So I started working on this person. And the reason this person actually came to me is that even though she came initially for the marriage, she had worked with another therapist in town. The therapist incidentally left right after this occurred, and left partly because of this woman. This woman and the therapist had gotten very close. This woman worshipped the therapist, so to speak, which is very typical in this case. And the therapist was young, Rudy felt, and the woman had gotten into the therapist's life, had gotten befriended, and, their had babysat and just sort of got more and more into this therapist's life, until there came a point when this woman was obviously completely dependent on the therapist. The therapist hung the moon. He was the father she never had. He was the person that... and so the therapist then, in the process of that situation, he suggested to her, he wondered to her if she had ever sat on her daddy's lap, just trying to probe the background like that, and that exploded the thing. She felt safe enough with him that she started remembering some stuff, and then she got suicidal and so powerful in terms of all the stuff she was going through, that this therapist, being so enmeshed and entwined in it, really couldn't handle it, and so next position he found, he took off. Okay, so he was a casualty of therapy now. Therapist who did something which didn't know what they were doing, and then didn't know how to handle it. And I say this too, just to make sure you understand that you're dealing, when you're dealing with situations like this, you're dealing with incredibly powerful stuff, internally and emotionally. She came to see me, and I wish there was a happy ending to this. The only happy ending is that she hasn't killed herself, and that she has a modicum, and she has a strong faith now. There's a time when she had no faith, or her faith was, and she no longer cuts herself actively, and let's say she is moderately healthy inside. I say this case to you partly because I've found that with such powerful forces and so things like that, that you almost need to do this in the context of a loving relationship, and that relationship can't be you and that person. And she didn't have a loving relationship at home with her parents. I tried to form one with the congregation, but the congregations didn't have small groups. She couldn't get it. She tried to start an abuse group, but that one didn't work. And so I could never get her in a situation or context where she felt safe enough so that she could continue. There was a psychiatrist in town that continued to work with her, too, as I worked with her for a while. And through that process, she has got some relative health. But we could never probe down and really change some of those messages. And the one thing that I've been searching for, and that maybe you can help me, the one of the things I remember vividly is she always told me that she would close her eyes or close her ears and say, I hear a little girl screaming, screaming, and screaming in the dark. And I said, where is that little girl? She's right in here. And then she wanted to take a knife and kill that little girl because it was so distressing. She said, if only that little girl would be gone, then I could live my life. That's her head. She'd become a big head, and she was trying to control her life and everything else. Only if I could get rid of that little girl. And to some degree, the therapist had awakened that little girl, so to speak, when he talked about sitting on lap, and she fantasized sitting on the therapist's lap and then being that little girl. And that little girl came out just like that. Now you couldn't put her back in the box, so to speak. Let me tell you how I worked with her. I found her one of the most manipulative persons that I've ever worked with, in a sense that it seemed that no matter what I did, she didn't trust. No matter what I tried to do, it was never enough. And I remember doing some extraordinary things, which on hindsight wasn't the smartest thing to do. Extraordinary things in terms of when she was upset, I would then respond to a call that she made in order to call and talk to her. I don't do that generally. Those are fairly good boundaries that I have, that I don't spend all my nights. Those are nights with Kathy. Those are we boundaries. So I don't spend my nights trying to fix and talk to people and do that. I do that within the bounds that represent my counseling practice. I remember doing extraordinary things with her, but then as we probe back in the limited stuff that I did, what I found was probably the most scary stuff that I've ever encountered, and no wonder she was damaged. It seems like she was a little girl, and it wasn't the daddy. The daddy let it happen. The daddy would get drunk with his friends while Mom was at work. Mom would be at work at night. Dad would have his friends over. They would get drunk. And then a couple of Daddy's friends would come into her bedroom and then do all sorts of sexual things with her. And then she would try to tell her daddy, and her daddy wouldn't listen, and things like that. Her mother wouldn't listen. And all of this stuff then got... And what I pictured, and this, she did help me with this, what happens to memories like that is that the Spirit has a wonderful way of just sort of breaking them up like glass, the vivid image, like this, and then you can't see them, but little pieces are everywhere. For example, the first thing I noticed about her was anytime someone approached her from the rear, she had an incredibly frightful reaction, and she'd immediately turn, and you wouldn't dare touch her on her back. If you touch her on her back, whoa! I mean, she would just go off the ceiling. Well, is that normal? I mean, where's that coming from? It was pretty obvious that she'd been touched there in inappropriate ways before, in hurtful ways and things like that. And so it's like her body remembered. Her body remembered everything, but it was all broken up, and she couldn't collect the memory like this. And let me get down to the lie. The one thing that was most helpful to her, because she felt, and then as we traced into adolescence, she allowed other people to do a lot of sexual things with her. And so she was very, very ashamed. And so she felt that she was worthless. That was the lie. The lie was that she was worthless, that she had been damaged, and somehow she'd allowed it. She didn't know how, but she figured it was her fault. And she was damaged, and she sure knew that from about age 10 on, she sure allowed that. Because she felt that she was so worthless that the only reason a boy would ever want to pay attention to her is that she would give herself sexually. And so she lived her life from 10 to 20, 23, until she finally married. And she married early just to escape this pattern. She lived her life constantly feeling worthless, totally shameful about herself. And then when she got married, or once, then she let herself get very large, hoping that no one else would ever find her attractive. It was one of the things that she finally came to. And so the lie was that she was worthless. And here's where then the only real, I helped her psychologically in terms of understanding what this other therapist had brought and helping her. And time's about up. I'll say this, and then we'll pick it up after lunch and with your questions and thoughts. The only thing that I really helped her with is one time, because I couldn't talk to that little girl. That little girl was just screaming, constantly screaming. And I said to her, "Look, that's your little girl. Why can't you hold it?" And she said, "I hate that little girl. I hate that." That was just her head talking. If that little girl wouldn't be there, I could live on my life. I hate this therapist who found her, and now she's there, and she's just screaming, and I sometimes, I drug myself. I do everything just to try to block her scream out because she is in absolute terror and pain, and I want to get rid of her. So the only image that helped, in prayer, before the altar, and then she let me touch her on her shoulders, and as I prayed, I asked her to listen or feel what Christ might be doing with her. And for the first time, she said, for the very first time, she felt a warmth and a safe place here. That was a feeling she'd never had. She'd never had a safe place inside. It was never any place she could go inside. And so look what she was doing. She was coming into my office desperately trying to find a safe place. She'd go to the psychiatrist. That was the only safe place she had, and that safe place she manipulated, see? Because she had never had a safe place inside. And she said she was out of control inside. It was like her spirit was out here. And at that one moment before the altar, this is very mysterious, but I know there's something profound here in terms of God's Word and her bringing that little girl, and I'm praying, and she felt for the first time but she did have a safe place inside. And that came and went. It's not like, wow, and everything in her life. It's like that came and went, but from that point on, her closeness with God I could begin to see develop. And I would say most of the functionality she's got now, and there's all sorts of things in terms of her relationship with her kids, and most of the functionality she has now is because she is closer to God. Let me close with prayer. Sorry I didn't give you a chance to ask questions, but we'll pick that up immediately after lunch as we follow this and maybe a case or two that you present or ideas that you present, and we move on to how do you help people when it comes to putting on their new self. That's really what she did. And how do you help people feel within their hearts that Christ is real? Dear Lord, we know in this life the devil usually wins. He's the prince of the power of the atmosphere. He's so clever and tricks us into doing all sorts of things, thinking all sorts of things that are dysfunctional, and actually believing them. Help break the lies within our own lives, and by the power of your Spirit of truth and of love, help us break the lies that are represented in the lives of the people that we touch. All for your grace and goodness, that it may abound, and the fruit of the Spirit may more abound in all of our lives. In Christ's name, amen.